Often we hear about another's tragedy, and it makes us feel better about our own situation. This is quite different from what the Dalai Lama was doing. He was not contrasting his situation with others, but uniting his situation with others, enlarging his identity and seeing that he and the Tibetan people were not alone in their suffering. This recognition that we are all connected, whether Tibetan Buddhists or Hui Muslims, or Unitarian Universalists, is the birth of empathy and compassion. I wondered how the Dalai Lama's ability to shift his perspective might relate to the adage, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Was it truly possible to experience pain, whether the pain of an injury or an exile, without suffering? There is a sutta, or teaching of the Buddha, called the Salata Sutta, that makes a similar distinction between our feelings of pain and the suffering that comes as a result of our response to the pain. When touched with a feeling of pain, the uninstructed, ordinary person sorrows, grieves, and laments, beats his breast, becomes distraught. So he feels two pains, physical and mental, just as if they were to shoot a man with an arrow and, right after, were to shoot him with another one, so that he feels the pain of two arrows. It seems that the Dalai Lama was suggesting that by shifting our perspective to a broader, more compassionate one, we can avoid the worry and suffering that is the second arrow. Then another thing, the Dalai Lama continued. There are different aspects to any event. For example, we lost our own country and became refugees, but that same experience gave us new opportunities to see more things. For me personally, I had more opportunities to meet with different people, different spiritual practitioners like you, and also scientists. This new opportunity arrived because I became a refugee. If I remained in the Potala in Lhasa, I would have stayed in what has often been described as a golden cage. The Lama, holy Dalai Lama. He was now sitting up stiffly, as he once had to when he was the cloistered spiritual head of the Forbidden Kingdom. So personally, I prefer the last 5 decades of refugee life. It's more useful, more opportunity to learn, to experience life. Therefore, if you look from one angle, you feel, oh, how bad, how sad. But if you look from another angle at that same tragedy, that same event, you see that it gives me new opportunities. So it's wonderful. That's the main reason that I'm not sad and morose. There's a Tibetan saying, wherever you have friends, that's your country. And wherever you receive love, that's your home. There was an audible gasp in the room at this poignant saying, and at its ability to ease, if not erase, the pain of a half-century spent in exile. That's very beautiful, the Archbishop said. Also, the Dalai Lama continued, whoever gives you love, that's your parent. So I consider you, although you are only 4 years older than me, as my father. I think you never could have had your children at the age of 4, so you are not my real father. But I do consider you as a father. What you said is quite wonderful, the Archbishop began, still clearly moved by the Dalai Lama's response to exile. I think I would just add to it by saying to our sisters and brothers out there, anguish and sadness in many ways are things that you cannot control. They happen. Supposing somebody hits you, the pain causes an anguish in you and an anger, and you might want to retaliate. But as you grow in the spiritual life, whether as a Buddhist or a Christian or any other tradition, you are able to accept anything that happens to you. You accept it not as the result of your being sinful, that you are blameworthy because of what has happened. It's part of the warp and woof of life. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. There are going to be frustrations in life. The question is not, how do I escape it? It is, how can I use this as something positive? Just as you, Your Holiness, have just described. Nothing, I think, can be more devastating in many ways than being turfed out of your own country. And a country is not just a country. I mean it is part of you. You are part of it in a way that is very difficult to describe to other people. By rights, the Dalai Lama should be a sourpuss. The Dalai Lama asked Jinpa for a translation of sourpuss. The Archbishop decided to explain it himself. It's when you do that face. He was pointing at the Dalai Lama's quizzical expression and pursed lips, which did look a little like he had bitten into 11. Just that face, just like that. You look like a real sourpuss. The Dalai Lama was still trying to understand how one's puss could look sour, and Shinpa was still trying to translate. And then when you smile, your face lights up. And it is because, in a very large measure, you have transmuted what you would have been totally negative. You've transmuted it into goodness, because, again, you have not said, well, how can I be happy? You've not said that. You've said, how can I help to spread compassion and love? And people everywhere in the world, even when they don't understand your English, they come and fill stadiums. I'm not really jealous. I speak far better English than you, and I don't get so many people coming to hear me as they come to you. And you know what? I don't think they come to listen. They may be doing that a bit. What they've come for is that you embody something, which they feel. Because some of the things that you say, in a sense, are obvious. Yet it's not the words. It's the spirit behind those words. It is when you sit and you tell people that suffering, frustration are not the determinants of who we are. It is that we can use these things that are seemingly negative for a positive effect. And I hope we can convey to God's children out there how deeply they are loved, how deeply, deeply precious they are to this God. Even the despised refugee whose name no one seems to know. I look frequently at pictures of people fleeing from violence, and there's so much of it. Look at the children. I say that God is crying because that is not how God wanted us to live. But you see again, even in those circumstances, you have these people who come from other parts of the world to try to help to make things better. And through the tears, God begins to smile. And when God sees you and hears how you try to help God's children, God smiles. The Archbishop was now beaming, and he whispered the word smile as if it were the holy name of God. He wants to ask another question, the Archbishop said, seeing that I was leaning forward. It was extraordinary to hear how deeply they were engaging with joy and suffering, but at the rate we were going, we wouldn't get through 1/10 of the questions we needed to ask. The Dalai Lama slapped the Archbishop's hand and said, "We have several days, so it's not a problem. If our interview is only 30 minutes or 1 hour, then we have to shorten our answers." "You must shorten your answers," the Archbishop said. "I am brief. First, let's have tea, and then I will be brief."